Welcome to General Conference Conversations, the podcast where we have conversations about General Conference. I'm your host, Kaylin, and I'm super excited to be here with you, studying the words of our living prophets, apostles, and chosen leaders. I've loved listening to podcasts about Come Follow Me, and I saw a need for a podcast centered around the General Conference talks. I'm not a scholar, I'm not an expert, I'm a 20-something who just simply adores the gospel. The things I discuss are my opinions. As one of my favorite podcasts, At Last She Said It, often says, your mileage may vary. In addition to my connections and thoughts, I will include a list of questions at the end of every episode as a place to start with your own deeper study of each talk. And I hope this podcast will be a jumping off point as you apply these principles to your life. In that spirit, I invite you to read and study today's talk before listening to this episode. Listen for what the Lord is saying to you personally. Then come join me for a beautiful discussion together. I'm back. I know it's been a week. Well, more than a week, but I skipped a week. Just to catch up on some stuff, reading through conference and making notes, and to make sure that I can give you the best thoughts on conference that I possibly can. So today we'll be reading Elder Holland's talk, or going through Elder Holland's talk, Fear Not, Believe Only. It's not the first talk in the Saturday afternoon session, but the first two talks were the sustaining of general authorities, Area 70s and general officers, and then the church auditing department. I figured we probably didn't need to go through those. They're pretty straightforward. So this is actually the third talk, but the first, actual talk, right? And as always, I encourage you to read or listen to this talk before you listen to this episode. So that you can get your own personal revelation, your own questions first, and maybe I can help answer those questions a little bit, or just, give you more questions to think about and study. So, this talk and the next one that'll come out on Thursday, are both quite related, actually. They're quite similar in their message. Basically, the atonement of Jesus Christ is the simplest way I can put it. And so they are very related, and so I'll probably be saying quite a few of the same, things, because there's a lot of the same themes. So, to jump right in, Elder Holland talks about all of the craziness happening in the world, right? The pandemic, brutality, violence, political aggression, social and cultural challenges ranging from economic deprivation to environmental desecration to racial inequity and more. And so he talks a lot about the youth in this, the power of the youth. He says, he's quoting, quotes an article from Forbes India in 2021. It says, the power of youth is the commonwealth of the entire world. The young are the faces of our future. And I think we put it, and that's true. I believe that's true. Obviously, they are the future leaders, the future parents, the future teachers, bus drivers, the people who will in the future be taking care of us. I don't want to say I'm 23, so I guess I don't know if I'm lumped in with the youth, but, my children, and the youth, the young adults that are in the world now are, just graduating college and, being in the world and, we are going to be the ones that are, running things and doing our best to try and keep the world together. And we talk about that a lot, right? Like the power of the youth, the importance of the youth. I think that's summed up pretty easily in the fact that, like, the bishop, the top leader in the ward, is in charge of the youth. Like, that is supposed to be his main priority, is the welfare of the youth. And that, he's the president of the young men's, and just all of that, right? Like, that sums up to me the importance that the church puts on the youth. And I mean, it makes sense, right? You think about Christ, the love and the care that he put into children. And we talked about this a couple episodes ago, of becoming like a little child, like having the simplicity of faith and the trust that a child has, putting that trust in God and in Jesus Christ. And so he goes on to say, given our current times, it is understandable if the idealism of the young is waning a little. I believe that is an understatement. Dr. Laurie Santos, a professor at Yale University, recently created a class titled Psychology in the Good Life. The first year the class was offered, nearly 1/4 of the entire undergraduate student body enrolled. Over 64 million people then visited her podcast. Writing about this phenomenon, one journalist noted how painful it is to see so many bright young students and adults desperately, quote, looking for something they've lost, or worse yet, longing for something they never had. My plea today to our youth and to you parents and adults who advise them is to begin your search for happiness by embracing the bounty we have already received from the giver of every good gift. And I really love that, because we do have a bounty, right? I mean, just look at the church library. Look at libraries, look at books and the internet, the good things on the internet. Like, we have a wealth of knowledge and information on anything we could possibly find. And of course it takes a little bit of extra vetting, right, when it comes from something like the internet, to be like, I should probably check the source and check, the intent of this website that I'm looking. Like, it takes extra effort, right? But we have a bounty. Like, I love that word, the bounty we have already received from the giver of every good gift. And so, like, I'm sure, like, of course he's talking about the gospel here, right? He's talking about the good books, that the Bible and the scriptures, the Book of Mormon, conference talks, church magazines, like, obviously those are good too, but the giver of every good gift. And I've always loved that concept that, like, every good thing comes from God, right? And it's so easy to be like, well, is this from God? Is this just me? Is it whatever? But every good thing that's persuading you to do good, to love people, to help people, to lift up people, to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in comfort. If it's something Jesus would do, right? Like, it's a good thing. So he goes on to say, see, where I lost my space. At precisely the moment many of the world are asking deep questions of the soul, we ought to be answering with the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I guess that's kind of where I want my first question to be, is, what bounty do you see in your life? What bounty from the giver of every good gift do you see in your life? And that doesn't just be, like I said, it doesn't have to be just church stuff, but like the knowledge, the love that you have in life, the people that you have in life, your experiences that you've had, good or bad, that have taught you, that you've learned from, and how does that all relate back to the gospel? Because it all does, right? And sorry, I'm making a note for myself, and I'm like he said, we ought to be answering with the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. And how does that all relate back to the gospel of Jesus Christ? It does, because of the atonement of Jesus Christ. Wow, I'm really rambling kind of all over the place today. I'm so sorry. But because of the atonement of Jesus Christ, because we are children of God, because he loves us, and he's trying to help us to succeed in this life in any way that he can, right, without infringing upon our agency, he's going to give us all the information that we need, that he can possibly give us. And so it's all connected. When I was a missionary, we played this game sometimes when we would meet other missionaries, and I also did this with members for like dinner messages and things like that when we would go over and have dinner with them, is we would pick something random in the room, like, I don't know, a light bulb, right? And be like, hey, how does that relate to the gospel? And it can in a lot of ways, right? Jesus is the light of Christ, or what the heck? Jesus is the light of the world. We have the light of Christ. Light, good is light, right? Light shows us the way. It's the way that we can be led to good things. Like, it can just go on and on and on and on and on, right? And so literally almost everything can be go back to the gospel of like, oh well, God loves us, so he gave us trees, or trees in, you know, the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil, the tree of life in Lehi's vision. Like, it can all be related back to the gospel somehow, because God is in everything. The gospel is in everything. And so those are my questions. What bounty do you see in your life from the giver of every good gift? And how does that relate to the gospel? Because the stretch from that is then when we are answering with the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, it doesn't necessarily mean we have to be yelling Jesus at everybody every time we have a conversation with them, right? The giver of every good gift also gave us love and kindness and the ability to listen, the ability to hug someone. He gave us cookies and cake and good food that we can bring people. He gave us, you know, movies that we can go and watch and just kind of decompress from the world. He gave us, you know, on and on and on, like, they all testify of Christ. So yeah, I invite you to think about that and think about how you can testify of the good news of the gospel in ways that are obviously about the gospel, right? How can you talk about church when you're at work with colleagues or with friends or whatever, but also, you know, be an example, be a disciple of Christ that doesn't necessarily need to talk about the gospel, right? Let's see if I can find my next. I have more highlights than that. Where'd my highlights go? Well, that's rude. Anyway, I got rid of my highlights on my notes. Okay. He goes on to say, President Nelson has said that this generation of young people has the capacity to have more impact for good on the world than any previous generation. We of all people should be singing the song of redeeming love, but that takes discipline, discipleship, if you will, the kind that guards against negative attitudes and destructive habits that would pull us off key as we try to sing the song of eternal salvation. Even as we stay on the sunny side of the street, we do run into that fellow from time to time who is determined to find something bleak and dismal about everything. You know his motto: it is always darkest just before it goes pitch black. And I agree. I mean, it's easy to get into, and I am so guilty of this, especially this last week. Has been really rough. A lot of dark things going on. I mean, always, right? So it's easy to get pulled into that. Oh, it's always darkest right before it goes pitch black, right? And it's hard to know, especially as a member of the church who's looking at the end times, right? We always talk about the latter days and the things that are going to happen before Christ comes again, and it's always, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Rumors of wars, natural disasters, violence, chaos, mayhem. Like, you look at the world and you're like, how can it not be tomorrow? How can it not be tomorrow that he's coming, right? And then you think, well, there's still things that, have been prophesied that need to happen before he comes. And so it's going to get worse. Are you kidding me? Like, are you serious? And so he goes on to say, what a malignant vision and what a miserable existence. Yes, we might sometimes want to run away from where we are, but we certainly should never run away from who we are. Children of the living God who loves us, who is always ready to forgive us, and who will never, ever forsake us. You are his most precious possession. You are his child, to whom he has given prophets and promises, spiritual gifts and revelations, miracles and messages, and angels on both sides of the veil. I really resonate with we might sometimes want to run away from where we are. And I think in some cases, it's okay to step back from the craziness of the world, right? It's okay to have a crap day and just lay in bed and do nothing, right? Our mental health and our physical health need that sometimes, just to take a break, to take a rest, even if it's not a whole day, just like an hour to like watch a movie and not have to think about anything, or just be outside and turn your phone off and stand in water. I did that yesterday for a bit. We have a creek near our house, and we just went and I just stood in the water. We were like looking at rocks and found cool things, and we were traipsing through mud, but for a while I just stood there and I just looked at the sky and the water. The sound of the water was so beautiful, and it was nice just to like get away from the world before I had to go back to it. But like he says, and I love this, we should certainly never run away from who we are, children of the living God who loves us, who is always ready to forgive us, and who will never, ever forsake us. And it's hard to do that, right? It's hard to pull yourself out of the muck that is in the world and look for the good all the time. And so sometimes it's okay to just be like, I'm gonna wallow in self-pity today. I'm gonna do nothing. But always remember who you are. And always remember that God is waiting for you. God is right there. Jesus Christ is right there to help pull you out when you're ready to come out. And then he goes on to talk about the church. He says, he has also given you a church that strengthens families for mortality and binds them together for eternity. It provides more than 31,000 wards and branches where people gather and sing and fast and pray for each other and give of their means to the poor. This is where every person is named, accounted for, and ministered to, and where lay friends and neighbors voluntarily serve each other in callings that range from clerical work to custodial duty. Young adults and senior couples as well serve missions by the thousands at their own expense, with no say whatsoever as to where they will labor, and members young and old trundle off to temples to perform sacred ordinances necessary to bind the human family together, a bold activity in such a divided world, but one that declares that such divisiveness is only temporary. These are the few of the reasons we give for the hope that is in us. And I truly, truly love that paragraph. It's hard not to be cynical and be like, well, that doesn't actually happen for everybody, right? The culture of the church, and I've talked about this a little bit, of like, I've seen people not be ministered to. I've been someone who doesn't minister very well. I've seen people who have just been forgotten or been pushed away by a ward, by members of a ward, by whatever, and they feel like that's them being pushed away from God. And so that does happen, but like, this is the actual like true meaning of the church, right? The blessings that come from an organized religion, an organized church, where the gospel is we try our best to make the gospel of Jesus Christ the center of it. That there's always going to be a ward or branch that you can find wherever you are, that you can take the sacrament, you can pray and fast with people, it's just beautiful. It's really easy for me particularly to become cynical of the organized church and the church culture, because people are people, right? Members are people, and so we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to be perfect at this, but we're trying, and that's really what counts. He goes on to say, of course, in our present day, tremendously difficult issues face any disciple of Jesus Christ. The leaders of this church are giving their lives to seeking the Lord's guidance in the resolution of these challenges. If some are not resolved to the satisfaction of everyone, perhaps they constitute part of the cross Jesus has said we would have to take up in order to follow him. It is precisely because there would be dark days and difficult issues that God promised he would, out of a cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, guide prophets, give an iron rod, open a narrow gate leading to a straight path, and above all grant us the power to finish the course. And I'm trying to think of how to say this tactfully. I have issues with this paragraph. Not issues. I think it's absolutely true, right? The leaders of the church are giving their lives. They have given up their worldly desires to be a leader for the church, to be a disciple or an apostle of the church, right? They don't work. They travel a lot. They give their whole time to the church to be a prophet, to be an apostle, which is a lot of work. I don't envy their position at all. And I absolutely think it's true. This is the thing. I'm not against Elder Holland in this thing. I'm in this paragraph. I'm against the principle that he's talking about. Not against. It bugs me. If some are not resolved to the satisfaction of everyone, perhaps they constitute part of the cross Jesus said we would have to take up in order to follow him. And I'm like, it's true. And that's why it's so frustrating, right? That, like, we don't know everything. We don't have a lot of revelation on the LGBTQ plus community, especially for like transgender people, right? We don't have a lot of guidance on that, and a lot of revelation on their part in the world and their purpose in the plan of salvation, and the it's all gonna work out in the next life. Cool, but how? Like, we don't have a lot of that. And I don't know if we ever will, and we don't, or it won't be for a while. Like, maybe it will be tomorrow, but for right now, we don't have that. It's not resolved to the satisfaction of everyone, right? The challenge of being a member of the LGBTQ plus community is not resolved in the church. And it's really hard to accept the fact of, like, okay, this is part of the thing that Jesus would have wanted us to take up. This is something that we have to be okay not knowing for now. And that's really hard when people are hurting, and, people that I know and love are hurting because of that not knowing. But it's true. And but I love that he says it is precisely because there would be dark days and difficult times, or difficult issues that God promised he would guide prophets, give an iron rod, open a narrow gate leading to a straight path, and above all grant us the power to finish the course. And that's how I stay. That's how and I think I've said this before, that's how I am able to kind of accept that, is that I know that, or I believe in the very basic principles of the gospel, that Jesus loves everybody, that he died for everybody, and that it all will work out. And I can keep fighting for my friends and my family and my loved ones who are in that really difficult position, right? In a challenge that isn't resolved. So, yeah. This is just a funny sentence. I love this. It says, please stay for the whole feast, even if you're not sure about the broccoli. And he says, bask in his light and lend your candle to the cause. They have it right in primary. Jesus really does want you for a sunbeam. And I just love that, because that's definitely how, like I said, that's how I've kind of accepted the questions and the struggle that I have on the daily with a lot of things in the church. Because we all have questions, right? We don't know everything, but I want to stay for the whole feast because I love 90% of the things that are in the feast. I love the temple. I love the fact that the belief of eternal families. I love, that I've had deeply personal experiences with God's love for me and with the Savior's love for me. And I don't want to give that up. But the broccoli, right? Like, I'm not sure about 10% of the other things that are at the feast. I'm like, I love broccoli, but, maybe there's shrimp. I'm like, I don't like shrimp. And so I'm like, well, but then am I gonna skip the whole feast? Am I gonna skip the whole potluck because there's shrimp on the menu? No. And of course that's easier said than done for a lot of people. And there's a lot of people who, it's the opposite, and they only like 10% of the things that are at the, maybe they only like the rolls and they hate everything else. That's not a full feast for them. And so they might leave. Or they might not come to the feast, and that's okay. And this is where he gets to, like, the title of his talk. He talks about the Jewish leader Jairus, I hope I'm saying that right, who was the one that asked Jesus to heal his 12-year-old daughter who was dying. And he couldn't get to him fast enough, and the man's servant came and said, your daughter is dead. Like, don't trouble him anymore. She's gone, basically. And this is a quote from, Luke 8, and says, but when Jesus heard it, he answered him, saying, fear not, believe only, and she shall be made whole. And she was, and so will you. Fear not, believe only. And I think it's totally normal to have fears. It's a normal human emotion, right? Fear allows us to know when danger is coming. Our fight or flight response is life-saving, right? I'm gonna be afraid if a bear comes out of the woods and starts coming at me. And my fight or flight response is going to be run, and that's gonna save my life, 99% of the time, right? But when we believe that Christ died for us and died for everybody, and we believe that God is going to judge everybody righteously, including us, for all the bad we did and all the good we did, right? He's going to judge us righteously and fairly then it gets easier, right? It's not easy still. It's still hard. Things are not going to go the way we plan. Things are going to be rough and scary and really hard to come to terms with. But it's easier to be like, okay, God has me. God has me in the palm of his hand. God also has all of these people in the palm of his hand. And he's got a plan for them. And he loves them just as much as he loves me. And if he loves them, then he's got to love me. And if he loves me, then he's got to love them, right? Is that kind of back and forth, like however you want to look at it, you know? And so he goes on to talk about, he says, I close with this special apostolic declaration, which is so cool that he's like, I'm declaring something to you as an apostle of Jesus Christ, right? Before you ever received the gift of the Holy Ghost, you had the light of Christ planted in your soul. That light which is in all things giveth life to all things, and is the influence for good in the hearts of all people who have ever lived or ever will live. That light was given to protect you and teach you. One of its central messages is that life is the most precious of all gifts, a gift that is obtained eternally only through the atonement of the Lord Jesus Christ, and the light and life of the world. As the light and life of the world, the only begotten Son of God came to give us life by conquering death. We must commit ourselves fully to that gift of life and run to the aid of those who are at risk of giving up this sacred gift. Leaders, advisors, friends, family, watch for signs of depression, despair, or anything hinting at self-harm. Offer your help, listen, make some kind of intervention as appropriate. And I really like this because he's still very respectful of, and obviously he's been talking this whole time. He's like, I get it. Life is hard. And so it's easy to lose that eternal perspective. It's easy to just think that life is just not worth it anymore. And he's talked about depression, his own battle with depression, his own experiences with depression. And he talks so empathetically. Wow, that's a really hard word for me to say that. Empathetically and so kindly and so compassionately about mental health. And you know, he pleads for people, you know, death by suicide is manifestly not the answer. It will not relieve the pain you are feeling or that you think you are causing. In a world that so desperately needs all the light it can get, please do not minimize the eternal light God put in your soul before this world was. You're loved and valued and needed. We need you. And I adore that. I just love how compassionately, how empathetically, how boldly he speaks about this, of like, it's not going to change anything, and you are so loved, and you are so needed, and you are so important in this world, and, you know, please stay. He says, this is kind of how he closes out, he says, someone who faced circumstances far more desperate than you and I ever will once cried, go forward, my beloved young friends, courage, and on to the victory. Let your hearts rejoice and be exceedingly glad. We have so much to be glad about. We have each other, and we have him. Don't deny us the chance to have you. I think this is just a really beautiful talk of, you know, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to feel like you're drowning sometimes in this really crazy, wacky, horrific world that we live in, right? There's a lot to be scared and anxious about. But remember that Jesus Christ has you in the palm of his hand. That he died for you, that he died for everybody in this world, everybody that you care about, everybody that you're worried about. He loves and cares about them as well. and that it's worth it. This life is so worth it, even though it's hard and even though it's scary. I don't have very many questions this time, but I will put the few questions I did ask in the description and in my caption on social media, and his apostolic declaration, his invitations. So I think that's all for this today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of General Conference Conversations. Be sure to follow and share us on any social media. And if you like the show, feel free to leave us a review or tell your friends. Until next time.